billionaire walks into a café every day, dismissing the waitress as just another face in the crowd. But when he notices the ring on her finger, everything changes. Now, he must confront his own life choices and discover what truly matters. In a world where love and connection are more valuable than money and status, will he learn to live for the moments that count before it's too late? Mike Cartwright walked into his usual cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of soft conversations filling the air. He had just come from a high-profile business meeting, one of many that seemed to blur together in his life. At 32, he had everything anyone could ask for: wealth, influence, and the respect of his peers. As the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, life had become a series of transactions, meetings, and dinners with other high-net-worth individuals. He wasn't looking for anything more, at least. That's what he told himself as he entered the cafe. His eyes scanned the room as usual. The place was busy, a mixture of professionals, students, and a few tourists. It was just another Tuesday afternoon. He didn't even glance at the staff, knowing his usual barista, Emma, would be there. She was a waitress, a simple, young woman who had been working there for a few months now. He often wondered why someone like her, clearly intelligent, would choose to work at a cafe, but he never gave it much thought. He was too absorbed in his own world to really pay attention to people like her. She was just another face behind the counter. Mike sat at his usual seat by the window, the one that gave him a perfect view of the bustling street outside. He pulled out his phone, checking emails, dismissing notifications, and tapping through his calendar as his mind raced with business thoughts. The world outside the window was a blur, just like most of his life. People came and went, but they didn't matter, not in his world. When Emma walked over to his table, she had a smile on her face. She was always polite, always professional, but there was a certain warmth in her that he hadn't noticed before. She was a typical waitress, always attentive, never too personal. She placed his coffee on the table in front of him with a gentle clink of the porcelain cup. "Your usual, Mr. Cartwright," she said, her voice soft but clear. Mike looked up, nodding absent-mindedly as he took a sip of his coffee. He wasn't in the mood for small talk, but he had to admit there was something about Emma that intrigued him. She was different from the other staff, more grounded, perhaps, but he quickly dismissed the thought. She was just a waitress, after all. "You seem to be working a lot lately," Mike remarked, half-heartedly attempting a conversation. "Busy day." Emma paused for a moment, glancing round the cafe before meeting his gaze. She smiled again, but there was a faint sadness in her eyes. "Yeah, it's been a bit hectic, but it's not so bad." Mike nodded, not fully interested but trying to appear polite. He checked his watch, already planning his next meeting in his head. But something caught his attention. A flash of gold as Emma turned slightly to adjust something on the counter. Mike's eyes fell on the ring she was wearing. It was a simple gold band, but there was something about it that made him freeze. He stared at the ring for a few moments, confused. Was it a wedding band? He had never noticed it before, but then again, he had never really paid attention to her. His mind raced. Why had he never noticed it? The question lingered in his thoughts, and for the first time, he actually looked at Emma as more than just the waitress who served his coffee. The ring on her finger seemed out of place for someone like her. She wasn't married, was she? She didn't seem like the type to settle down, at least not in his experience. But there it was, the gleam of a gold ring sitting on her left hand. It wasn't extravagant, not like the jewelry he was used to seeing, but it was still a promise, a commitment. Mike's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit him. This woman, this waitress, wasn't as simple as he had thought. He felt a strange knot form in his stomach, something he hadn't experienced in years. Was it guilt, regret, or was it something else? The thought that someone like Emma, someone he had dismissed as just another waitress, could have a life outside of this cafe. A personal life that involved love and commitment was a foreign concept to him. His mind raced with questions, but he didn't know where to begin. He looked up at Emma, but she was already walking away, her back turned. The moment had passed, and she was no longer the simple waitress he had always known. She was someone else now, a mystery he hadn't even realized existed. Mike took another sip of his coffee, but it tasted different now, bitter somehow. It wasn't the coffee, it was something inside him, a sudden awareness, a shift in his perspective. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew one thing for sure: Emma wasn't who he thought she was. The following day, Mike returned to the cafe, though he wasn't sure why. His mind kept replaying the image of the ring on Emma's finger, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. It was odd he had no reason to care about the personal life of a waitress. He had dated high-profile women, traveled the world, and had everything anyone could want. Yet, the thought of Emma, a simple woman working in a cafe, had somehow gotten under his skin as he walked in. The usual hum of conversation and the clinking of cups filled the air. He scanned the room, searching for her. She wasn't hard to spot. Her movements were graceful, and despite the chaotic energy around her, she seemed at ease, as though the cafe was her world. Mike took a seat at his usual spot, but this time, he didn't immediately pull out his phone. He sat back, lost in thought. A few minutes later, Emma appeared at his table, coffee pot in hand. She greeted him with a polite smile, but Mike noticed the subtle change in her demeanor. She was more focused today, less chatty than usual. He didn't blame her. She probably had a lot on her mind, just like he did. "Hi, Mike, the usual?" she asked, her voice steady. "Yeah, thanks, Emma," he replied, his voice softer than usual. She set the cup down in front of him, and as she did, Mike couldn't help but glance at her hand again. The ring was still there, but this time it felt more significant. It wasn't just a ring anymore. It was a symbol of something Mike couldn't quite grasp. "Busy day?" he asked, trying to make small talk. Emma paused for a moment, looking around the cafe before meeting his gaze. "Yeah, it's always busy here, but that's okay. Keeps me busy." Mike didn't know why, but he felt compelled to ask her more questions. He'd never been interested in people's personal lives, but today something was different. Something about Emma intrigued him. "Do you like working here?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. Emma looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to soften her features. "I do, actually. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. I meet all kinds of people, and I get to serve them coffee. It's simple, but it's enough for me." Mike nodded, absorbing her words. He hadn't expected such an honest answer. Most people he knew would have given him a scripted response about dreams, ambitions, and climbing the social ladder. But Emma didn't seem to care about any of that. She seemed content with her life, with the simple things. He couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. There was something freeing about her indifference to the pressures he felt every day. Mike was constantly striving for more money, more success, more validation. But Emma, She seemed to have found peace in a life he couldn't understand. "Are you married?" The question slipped out before Mike could stop it, and as soon as he said it, he regretted it. Emma blinked, clearly taken aback by the suddenness of the question. But instead of looking offended, she simply smiled, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "No, I'm not married," she replied, her voice calm. "But I am engaged." Mike froze. The words hit him like a brick. Engaged to who? The thought of Emma being with someone else, someone who had captured her heart, made something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Oh," was all he could manage to say. He quickly glanced down at his coffee, unable to meet her eyes. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but it certainly wasn't this. Emma seemed to sense his discomfort, but instead of pressing him, she simply nodded and turned to walk away. As she moved to the next table, Mike's mind raced. She was engaged to someone else. The realization hit him hard, and for the first time in a long time, Mike felt something he rarely experienced: regret. He had always believed that he could have anything he wanted. Wealth, success, admiration, they were all within his reach. But Emma, she was different. She wasn't someone he could simply buy with money or impress with his status. She was real, and she was out of his grasp. Mike took a long sip of his coffee, but it tasted bitter. It wasn't just the coffee, it was everything. The awareness that he had overlooked something valuable for so long weighed heavily on him. He had underestimated Emma, thought she was just another face in the crowd, but now he realized that she was more than that. She was someone with her own story, her own life, and her own love, and somehow, in the brief moments they had shared, he had become a part of that story, even if it was just for a fleeting second. The next few days passed in a blur for Mike. He found himself returning to the café more frequently than usual, his eyes always searching for Emma. He couldn't quite understand why he was so fixated on her. It wasn't just about the ring, or the fact that she was engaged was something deeper, something he hadn't experienced before. He was used to being in control. In his business life, he made decisions with ease, manipulated situations to his advantage, and always knew what to expect. But Emma, she was a mystery he couldn't solve, a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. He liked the unpredictability she brought into his otherwise structured life. On one of his visits, Mike sat down, but this time he didn't look at his phone. He wasn't thinking about meetings or deals. He was thinking about Emma. He found himself watching her as she moved around the cafe, her interactions with the other customers effortless, her smile warm and genuine. It wasn't hard to see why people liked her. There was an honesty about her that Mike found refreshing. She didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. She didn't need the validation of wealth or status. She was content with who she was. But that wasn't what bothered Mike. What bothered him was that he wanted to be part of her life, to understand what made her tick, what made her happy. It was something he hadn't felt in years, a longing for something real, something that didn't have to do with money or business success. "Your usual, Mike." Emma's voice broke through his thoughts, and Mike looked up, surprised to see her standing there, a coffee pot in hand. "Yeah, thanks," he replied, his voice a little hoarse. He didn't want to admit it, but his heart skipped a beat when he saw her standing there, so close. As she poured his coffee, she glanced at him with a soft smile. "Busy day?" Mike hesitated for a moment. The usual response would have been to nod and dismiss the question, but today he wanted to be honest. "It's been hectic, but I'm getting through it." Emma nodded, understanding more than he thought. Yeah, I get that. Life's always a bit hectic, isn't it? Mike looked at her for a long moment, taking in her words. He had never expected such depth from her. She wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who understood the chaos of life, who had her own struggles and triumphs, even if they were different from his. I guess it is, Mike replied, his voice quieter now. But sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, you know? Emma's expression softened, and she sat down across from him, her usual busyness momentarily forgotten. I know what you mean. It's easy to get caught up in everything and forget what really matters. But sometimes the small things are the ones that make life worth living. Mike wasn't sure why, but her words hit him in a way he wasn't expecting. He had spent so much of his life chasing after bigger and better things, never stopping to appreciate the simple moments. Emma's words made him realize how much he had missed, how much he had taken for granted. Do you ever think about the future? He asked, his curiosity getting the best of him. Emma paused, her eyes thoughtful. I think about it sometimes, but I try not to get too caught up in what's ahead. I'm more about living in the present, you know. The future will come when it does. Mike thought about her response for a moment. It was a far cry from the way he lived his life. He was always planning, always looking ahead, always thinking about the next big thing. He didn't know how to live in the moment, how to just be present. So, what's your future like? Mike asked, his voice more earnest now. Emma smiled, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes. Well, I'm getting married soon. I'm planning a future with someone I love, someone who makes me happy. I know it's not a grand vision of success, but it's mine. The words hit Mike harder than he expected. He didn't know why, but the thought of Emma being with someone else, sharing her life with someone else, made a pang of jealousy rise within him. He wasn't used to feeling like this, especially not over someone he had dismissed as just another waitress. But now, he couldn't ignore the feelings he had developed. I'm sure he's a lucky guy, Mike said, his voice sounding distant even to him. Emma's smile faltered for a moment, and she looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. He's lucky in his own way, yes, but sometimes I wonder if I'm really lucky. I mean, everyone thinks they have their life all figured out, but the truth is, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along. Mike was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. Maybe Emma wasn't so different from him after all. Maybe they were both just trying to find their place in the world, trying to figure out what made them truly happy. Thanks for the coffee, Emma, Mike said finally, standing up to leave. He felt like he had learned something important, though he wasn't sure what it was yet. Anytime, Mike, she replied, a hint of sadness in her voice as she watched him walk away. As Mike stepped out of the café, he realized something. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his next business deal or the next big thing. He was thinking about Emma, about the life she had, the love she was planning to build. And somehow, in that moment, he wished he could be a part of it. The following week, Mike couldn't bring himself to return to the café. He had been back a couple of times, but each visit felt different, like he was intruding on a world he didn't belong to. Emma's engagement had been a wake-up call for him, one that forced him to confront the fact that he had been living his life with a shallow sense of purpose. He had everything he could want, yet he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. He spent the next few days buried in work, using his usual distractions to push away the thoughts of Emma. But no matter what he did, his mind kept wandering back, to her. The way she had smiled at him when he asked about her future, the way her words had resonated with him, it all lingered in the back of his mind. For the first time in his life, Mike realized that he wasn't just a spectator in his own story. He was lost. It was Thursday afternoon when he finally decided to go back. He had been thinking about it all morning, and as he walked through the door of the cafe, he felt the same rush of emotions hit him. The familiar smell of coffee, the sound of laughter, and the busy energy of the cafe all felt the same. But today, it wasn't just another visit. Today, something had changed. Emma was behind the counter. As usual, her head down as she worked, but Mike could see the ring on her finger. The sight of it made his heart skip a beat, and for a moment, he considered turning around and walking out. But he didn't. He needed to see her to understand why she had left such an impression on him. He made his way to his usual seat, his palms slightly sweaty. He had no idea what he was going to say, but he knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. He had to speak up, had to ask the questions that had been gnawing at him since their last conversation. As Emma saw him sitting down, she gave him a warm smile. She didn't seem surprised to see him. Maybe, Mike thought, she was used to him being here. Maybe she had noticed that he had been absent. "Back again, Mike?" she asked, her voice light, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Mike took a deep breath before answering. "Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what you said." Emma paused for a moment, placing a coffee pot on the counter. "About what?" "About your future," Mike said, his voice a little uncertain. "I don't know why, but it stuck with me. The way you talked about life, about love. I've spent my whole life chasing things, but it feels like I've missed out on something important." Emma studied him for a moment, her eyes softening. "Mike, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I just... I don't know. I guess I've always believed that life doesn't have to be complicated. It's the small things that matter. The love we give, the moments we cherish. That's what makes life worth living." Mike looked at her, his heart heavy with emotions. He didn't fully understand. He had spent so many years focusing on his career, his success, that he had forgotten what it meant to live to truly live. He had built his life around achievements and accolades, but somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of what truly mattered. "I don't know what I'm looking for, Emma," Mike said, his voice low. "I have everything most people would dream of, but when I look at you, it feels like you have something I've been missing." Emma smiled, but it wasn't the bright, bubbly smile she usually wore. This one was softer, more knowing. "I don't have everything figured out, Mike. I'm just trying to live my life in a way that makes sense to me. I don't have all the answers, but I know that the love I share with the person I'm marrying is what matters most." Mike nodded, absorbing her words. It was hard to admit, but Emma had something he didn't, something he couldn't buy or attain with success. She had a sense of peace, of contentment, that Mike had never felt. And in that moment, he realized that he had been searching for fulfillment in all the wrong places. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he knew he needed to change. He needed to stop living for the next deal, the next win, and start living for the moments that truly mattered. "Thank you, Emma," Mike said, standing up to leave. "You've given me something to think about." Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're welcome, Mike. I hope you find what you're looking for." As Mike stepped out of the cafe, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but something inside him had shifted. He didn't know what the future held, But he was no longer chasing after the wrong things. He was going to take things one step at a time, starting with living in the moment and appreciating the small things, just like Emma had taught him. A week had passed since Mike's last visit to the cafe, and although life had continued to move at its usual pace, something inside him had changed. He no longer felt the urgency to chase after the next business deal, the next success, the next accomplishment. Emma's words had left a lasting impression on him. For the first time, Mike realized that true happiness wasn't measured by the number of zeros on his bank statement or the accolades he collected. It was measured by the relationships he built, the love he shared, and the small moments that brought meaning to his life. The days following his conversation with Emma were a mix of reflection and subtle change. He had made a conscious decision to slow down, to look beyond the world of business, and to reconnect with the things that truly mattered. He spent more time with his family, reconnected with old friends, and found himself appreciating the little things like the laughter of children in the park or the warmth of a good cup of coffee. It was as if the world had opened up in ways he had never noticed before. But despite these changes, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. He had made peace with his own inner turmoil, but there was still the matter of Emma. He couldn't get her out of his mind. There was something about her that drew him in, something that made him question everything he thought he knew about love and relationships. He had seen her at the cafe a few times, but he had kept his distance, unsure of how to approach her now. He had tried to convince himself that it was just a fleeting attraction, something that would fade with time. But the more he thought about her, the more he realized that his feelings for her were deeper than that. There was a connection between them, a bond that he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the ring on her finger, or the fact that she was engaged. It was the way she made him feel, the way she had changed his perspective on life. It was Friday afternoon when Mike walked into the cafe once again. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew he needed to see Emma, to talk to her. As soon as he entered, he spotted her behind the counter, her hands busy with a coffee order. Her presence had an almost magnetic pull, and Mike felt his heart race as he approached her. Emma looked up as he walked toward the counter, and her face lit up with a warm smile. It was the same smile she always gave him, but this time it felt different. There was a certain softness in her expression, a familiarity that made Mike feel like he was finally home. "Hey, Mike, how's it going?" she asked, her voice friendly, but there was something deeper in her eyes now. Maybe she could sense the change in him. Mike smiled, but this time it was different. It wasn't just a polite gesture, it was genuine. "Hey, Emma, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately." Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "About what?" "About everything," Mike said, his voice quieter now. "About life, about what really matters. You were right, you know. All that stuff I've been chasing money, success, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have someone to share it with." Emma's eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked at him with a kind of understanding. "I'm glad to hear that, Mike. Life can be so much more than just achievements. It's about love, connection, and the moments that make us feel alive." Mike nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He had finally come to terms with the fact that he didn't need to chase after every fleeting desire to feel fulfilled. He had found something more meaningful, a sense of peace, a sense of purpose, and it was all thanks to Emma. "I've been thinking about what you said," Mike continued, his heart pounding in his chest, "and I think I need to make a change. I don't want to keep living the way I was. I want to be more present, too. Live for the moments that matter. Emma smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. I'm glad you're realizing that, Mike. It's never too late to change the direction of your life. Mike paused, taking a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. I don't want to just be a guy who shows up in your life for a fleeting moment. I don't want to be someone who regrets never taking a chance. So, I'm asking you if you can find it in your heart to give me a chance. I'd like to get to know you better. Maybe not as the billionaire you think I am, but as the man who wants to learn how to live in the present, how to appreciate the things that matter. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment she was silent. But then she reached across the counter, her hand brushing against his. Mike, I'm flattered, but you know, I'm already engaged. I love him, and I'm planning my future with him. I don't think that's something you and I can change. Mike nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions flood over him. Part of him was disappointed, but part of him felt a sense of relief. He had spoken his truth, and he had come to terms with the fact that Emma had her own life to live, her own journey to follow. Of course, Mike said softly, his voice filled with understanding. I respect that, and I think, in a way, I've learned something even more important today. It's not about trying to force something that's not meant to be. It's about letting go and accepting what is. Emma smiled warmly, her eyes filled with admiration. You're learning, Mike, and that's what matters. You've already started living for the right things. Mike smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. As he turned to leave, he realized that sometimes the most important lessons in life came not from the people you tried to change, but from the people who changed you. He didn't need to chase after anything anymore. He had already found what he was looking for.